Okie dokie. So tonight, we're going to talk monetary policy. But before we do, I'm going to give a little bit of preview into what's coming for the next few weeks, because we're probably not going to get to cover everything that's on syllabus, which is okay. As I kind of talked about at the beginning of the semester, I've got a little bit more flexibility in this class. And so I wanted to do a little bit of a straw poll this afternoon before I adjust the syllabus for the next couple of weeks. The things that we tended to be talking about, so we'll talk tonight about monetary policy. But as we talk macroeconomic policies, so kind of how the monetary systems, the banking system interact with driving the macro economy. And we talked about banking and how banking works and how financial markets work. If I said, kind of pick one of those two that's of more interest to you, which direction do you guys lean? The banking policy, financial market side, or the macroeconomic side? So I'll let you marinate on that a minute. And so I'll now ask you to raise your hand. So if I said, look, you really like the banking, investments, financial market side, raise your hand. And if you like the macroeconomic policy, political side, raise your hand. Okay, so we got an answer, which is I'll start to shift emphasis for the rest of the semester off of some of the monetary policy, fiscal policy, macroeconomic elements. And to the extent we start running short, I'm going to shift it more into banking, bank policy, financial institutions, and that piece. Does that sound fair? Okay. So that gives me my homework for the weekend. So what you'll see from me is likely on Monday a tweak to the syllabus. So I'll take out a couple chapters of reading, a couple chapters of what will be covered on the final, and it may actually, I pulled a couple chapters off when I initially wrote the syllabus. I may actually add a chapter or two back on. So tonight we're going to talk monetary policy. So the Federal Reserve is the keeper of monetary policy. They're the ones that actually make monetary policy work in the macroeconomy. So when I talk about monetary policy, what am I talking about? Well, yes, money, monetary policy. What the Fed does,
policies are put in place to adjust, like interest rates, what they do to. So what economy?
Yeah, so monetary policy is the Fed's tools that they can use to impact the economy. And what's fiscal policy?
Well, that was done by the politician.
So it's done by the politicians how, Chuck?
Well, I was just leading with that.
It's like policy when they do set year,
Isn't that like
within a year, how much they can do or something like that?
not like changing
I know, I read
tax law, stuff like that, when they come in, it's horrible. Like, monetary policy is something that they might come in when there's a crisis and do to kind of bring back. Fiscal policy is something that's kind of a long-term change.
Not really.
Okay, that's right.
Not really. Oh no, but it was a good try. You guys are onto it. Eddie's close. Chuck's close. You got components.
The choice of taxes and government spending.
Dang! You looked at the book because I know y'all do the reading. So yeah, fiscal policy is what the levers the government can pull in order to be able to impact the economy. It's basically tax policy and spending policy. And so they go, okay, if we want to stimulate the economy, what do we do? Well, we're going to spend money. We're going to
do shovel-ready projects, I think was President Obama's terminology. So I got shovel-ready projects. We're gonna basically start spending government money to put people back to work.
Bush did that.
Yeah, he also did, President Bush also did the stimulus. So he said, tax policy, I'm going to issue early tax refunds to folks so that they'll spend them and try and give a boost to the economy after 9/11. And so you've got these two components. You've got fiscal policy, which is controlled by the politicians. It's government spending policy and taxation policy. Monetary policy is controlled by the Fed, who are theoretically not politicians. And the two of them work to impact the economy. Generally, they work in concert. So the economy's going to heck in a handbasket. Normally, the government will pull a bunch of fiscal policy levers, and the Fed will pull a bunch of monetary policy levers to try and turn the economy around. If the economy's overheating and you're getting too much inflation, or you're getting overemployment, you're getting, which results in too much inflation, the economy gets overheated, the Fed can throw levers to drive interest rates up, bring the economy down, and the government can pull back on spending and increase taxes to slow the economy down. And the government has an incentive from an inflation perspective and from a policy perspective to keep the rate of growth somewhere between 2 and 4% annually. As long as the economy is growing at 2 to 4% annually, and the population is growing at 2 to 4% annually, and everything's growing at 2 to 4% annually, we're in a like pretty happy little place. And so from a policy perspective, the government tends to look at that 2 to 4% growth rate as optimal. Once it drops much below 2%, they start throwing levers to bring it back up. Once it gets above 4%, start throwing levers to bring it back down. So the Fed are the fine folks that handle monetary policy. So who the heck are the Fed? The Fed are there's 12 regional Federal Reserve banks. And when you look at a Federal Reserve note, I think I might have one in my pocket. You guys might all have one in your pocket too. This is a good one. This is a $1 bill. Sometimes I have those. Having a family, I tend to not have a lot of Federal Reserve notes in my pocket.
We have time.
But if you look at your Federal Reserve note, over here on the side, you'll see this little thingy dingy. And it says Federal Reserve note. It'll say what Federal Reserve Bank issued it, what location. This one here, I'm getting old and I don't have good eyes. My lights are off. Yeah, this was Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, Virginia.
I don't see it here. This one is July 4th, 2017. No, I just see from the back, so I don't know.
She just brought the pen. You have a dollar.
You got a buck.
Hey, give it back to me.
This is a cool little Federal Reserve note. It says, I'm a Federal Reserve note from the Bank of Richmond, Virginia. And so, it says Federal Reserve, this is a system. It doesn't have a bank? No.
I don't see it.
Dang. Did they take those away on the new stuff? I don't have new money. I don't get my stuff.
I don't see it.
Let's gotta keep your money in the battery. Cycle.
Okay, so on your $1 bills, that'll tell you what Federal Reserve Bank came from. There's 12 of them. And so you know, on your coins, you got the little mint marks. So sometimes you got an S or a D for Denver, San Francisco, Mint, or Philadelphia is where the bulk of the coins are minted. On your dollar bills, at least we on all bills, but on your dollar bills, you can tell which ones I carry most of the time. You've got the Federal Reserve Bank. There's 12 of them. We're in Federal Reserve District 12, which is the West Coast, basically out to the Rockies. And our Federal Reserve Bank, the headquarters of our Federal Reserve Bank is in San Francisco, California. We're also exists as San Francisco Mint. So you got a lot of money getting printed in San Francisco. So in case you ever wonder why San Francisco is so expensive, because all the money's there. There's a branch office of the Fed here in beautiful Seattle, Washington. So if you ever want to just go all anarchist like they did on Monday, and you want to really bring the government down, just go wander up to the Federal Reserve up in Seattle. So we're in Region 12, and there's 12 different regions. 12 man.
see. Oh, that man, maybe.
The Fed is run by this group of Federal Reserve governors. Each bank has a governor. And then there's the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Anybody know who the name of the chairman of the Federal Reserve is?
President.
No. No. He used to be.
Ed Martin.
No. Ed Martin is woefully unqualified to be the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Janet Yellen. So Janet, who appointed Janet Yellen?
I thought she took over for. Is it's presidential appointment?
Presidential appointment confirmed by the Senate. Once they're appointed and confirmed by the Senate, President of the United States, POTUS. You learned something new tonight. Once they're appointed by the president can't go fire them. He can't go, Janet Yellen, you're an Obama appointee, you're a communist. I'm going to fire you and put someone else in the kid.
I like how you accurately said they're informed by the Senate.
Oh, well, you know, Pat fingers. Conform.
Maybe it's more.
That might be it.
Yeah.
So,
So you're saying if he appoints them, he can't?
you fire them. You can impeach them. Can't fire them. President can't fire the appointee.
But
Once they're
well,
appointed,
obviously, he likes to be appointed, right?
yeah, but that was the last president. So Janet Yellen was appointed by President Obama.
How long,
President Trump now cannot fire Janet Yellen.
how long does Janet get?
6 years, I believe, is her appointment. And they're confirmed by the Senate. Once they're confirmed, they're independent of the political system. So the only way they can get fired is if they're impeached.
China people.
No, the people can't impeach anybody. They're beyond the reach of the people.
Who got impeached then?
Who can impeach them? Who knows your constitutional law?
I know.
The people.
Oh, I know about this when I did my citizenship that I forgot.
These are all the words I know.
So impeachment, articles of impeachment come from the people's house. So the House of Representatives sends over the article of impeachment to the Senate. The Senate then tries the person, and if found they are impeached. What happens if you're impeached? What happens if you're found guilty during the impeachment process? You're fired. You're out.
You go down. Yeah.
You're kicked out of your job.
You do it Nixon and resign first.
Yes, you can. You can't do it Nixon and resign first, or you can do it Bill Clinton or Andrew Johnson and get impeached and not lose. Andrew Johnson by 1 vote. So that's the impeachment process. So you can get somebody impeached, but otherwise they're beyond the system. They're independent of politicians. Why? So why is the system set up this way? Why is the system set up that President Obama can appoint these folks, and in 6 years, so each alternating president can appoint portions of the Fed governors, and they're all out there, and once they're appointed, the president can't fire them, the Senate can't fire them, the House can't fire them, except for an impeachment proceeding. Why do you think it was set up that way?
System of checks and balances.
Explain.
If the president can't fire somebody from the previous president, then Trump doesn't have the ability to fire somebody that might or might not be good that Obama put in the office. So unless the person's screwing up, they can't get kicked out.
If they're screwing up, they're pretty tough to get kicked
I
out.
imagine it.
So why in this particular case, why do they keep the Federal Reserve governors independent of the politicians?
Sway one way or the other.
I'd buy that for $1 from Richmond Federal Reserve Bank.
Conflicts of parties. Because one Republican could just hire up the Republican to fire on the Democrats.
Any of them are gonna do it.
Yeah, so you've got a hit on it as well, Eddie, which is, it comes down to Oscar's. Oscar's answer is kind of the schoolhouse answer, which is, look, we don't want monetary policy to be politically driven, because otherwise, every president at the time at which they're coming up for a re-election, or every Congress every 2 years at the time they're coming up for re-election, or senators every 6 years or 2 years on their 6-year terms, are going to put pressure on the Fed to work with monetary policy, maybe drive inflation up, but spike it temporarily so people go, oh, this is wonderful. Or they're going to go, oh my gosh, I think let's use current examples. I think the Democrats are going to have a real good election in 2018 because people are all upset with Trump. And so Trump goes, ratchet the economy way back up so that way I can see things are going well. Or you have a situation where you go, the president's going, here's what I'd like to see happen. Economy's kind of in the crapper, but I can't go anywhere. I got another 2 years to go. And Congress is, instead of being all Republican, is all Democrats. Tank the Congress. Tank the economy right now so that way the voters get mad. The only people that can vote out are a third of the senators in the entire House of Representatives, and I can get a bunch of Republicans away. So they take it out of the politicians' hands in theory, so that it doesn't influence elections or elections don't influence economic policy.
Well, it could also have dramatic effects on the global stock market and economy, because other countries who invest with us, if that were to happen during the next election, they may pull all their money out because they don't know how it's going to go, or they may not be trading until everything kind of levels out. It could have a severe effect on if they were allowed to change regularly.
How many people buy Joe's argument? The U.S. monetary policy could have significant impact upon the global economy. Kim, Ed, Oscar, you're buying that for $1? Okay, I'll take it back then. I gave you $1. And I,
back for me?
well, you were buying that for $1, so now I got my $1 back.
I read that facial expression. I was like, I wouldn't bet on that one.
So, no, Joe's right. Anything that happens to the U.S. economy, the U.S. economy catches a cold and Europe sneezes. We are the largest economy in the world, and we have significant influence over every other economy in the world. And so our policies impact everybody else. And so as a result, they structured this in such a way as to try and remove political influence over this piece. But why did they leave so much political influence over fiscal policy? Why did they leave so much political influence over fiscal policy, over the ability of the Congress and the president to impact federal spending and taxes?
Or you can almost translate it as that is the check and balance. Even if they still control things. They control the money, but politicians control how the money is being used. That's not what we have.
The short answer is the Constitution says so. Article 1 of the Constitution says Congress shall have the power to levy taxes and to spend the money. President then executes on that. So it's all in a checks and balances component, and that's where the people actually continue to have influence through your elected representatives. Because once the Fed is off, you don't have influence. You might have influence over Congress. You don't have influence over our Fed governor down in San Francisco.
So if Obama appointed her, so there's no influence behind her?
Well, he's going to be going through the process of, okay, is she qualified? She's got to go through a Senate confirmation process, and did. And through a Senate that was not necessarily favorable. I mean, you generally have a Republican Senate, split it a little bit, but they've got to go through the Senate confirmation process just like a Supreme Court justice does. And so ideally, you're looking for an extraordinarily qualified economist to be your Fed chair and your Fed bank governors. The president will generally appoint somebody if they're a demand side president, so they're a tax and spend liberal. They will tend to support, or they will tend to appoint economists who also believe that that is the best way to govern in the economy. If they are a supply sider and the government should stay the heck out of all economic policy conservative, they will tend to appoint similar thinking economists to the Fed Bank. Having said that, you can't get too far off the rails one direction or the other. And you're always going to have, because of their terms, you're always going to have a mix, or usually you'll have a mix, unless you end up with a situation like we had with, really from 1968 to 1992, where you had a string of Republican presidents from Nixon and Ford with this little Jimmy Carter mix. And then you had Reagan and Bush. We had Republicans as the president for the better part of 2 decades. And then you tend to get the Fed all starts leaning one direction. And the Supreme Court all starts leaning one direction because those are longer term appointments, where we as a people can't really make change. So the Fed controls the monetary base. When I say monetary base, what do you think I'm talking about? And what is M1? What is M1?
Somebody wrote the book.
Oh, we covered M1 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago. You know what M1
I
is,
know what
Charlotte?
it was. I know like credit card, cash, credit card.
My credit cards are not M1.
I remember.
I don't think there can be liquid
Cash, checks, and traveler's checks.
Oh, yeah, I remember that now. I think it's
That's just
more.
credit checks.
That only
I
for me.
remember talking about that for sure. So
Yeah,
the
me too now.
VFW.
I just don't realize it's M1.
M1, the M1 money supply.
Yeah.
So the Fed controls the amount of currency in circulation plus the bank reserve requirements. That's the monetary base. So the Fed goes, here's all the currency that's out there, and we're going to talk about what fiat currency is backed by tonight. The theory behind what fiat currency is backed by. You'll find that it's kind of a little bit of an ephemeral thing.
I thought it was just like good faith or belief or something.
Yes, backed by the full faith of the United States, and I'll show you why.
It's all about investment.
I'll show you the accounting of why, as opposed to just me saying it. You'll see the accounting.
Oh, what did you say? How much money did everyone have if you were divided all up?
I can't remember the number.
It only depends on.
If I collect money from my friend,
It's not a lot. I think there's, but I'd have to get back into my.
Yeah, but that's how much money we actually have.
if I collect money from my friend, so all my money, I need my note back.
I need my note back. I need my federal. I need my
What
federal.
is that?
So what the Fed controls is the currency that's out there, the cash, and they control the reserve requirement. They can't control your checking account, right? But they can control how much of your checking account the bank can actually turn around and lend back out. The reserve requirement is what the Fed says, you need to keep this on deposit with us. And we're going to talk about the reserve requirement because it has a tremendous impact on the economy. It should not be understated how much impact the Federal Reserve's reserve requirement at the banking level has on the economy and on the money multiplier. So what you've got is essentially the Fed going, look, I've got a couple levers I can pull, currency that's out there, and what the reserves look like from the banks. How much they have, how much they borrow, how much they owe, and how much they need to maintain and deposit with us. That's the monetary base. The Fed impacts monetary base through open market operations. So and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but there's this thing called the Fed Open Market Committee, FOMC. And the FOMC is a subset of the Fed governors that meet every 6 weeks. And they go, okay, what's the economy doing? And what should we do with reserve requirements? What should we do with interest rates at the discount window? What should we do with currency levels? What should we do? And then they make those decisions, and then they go back to the little Federal Reserve banks and send out a memo and say, here's what you need to do. And the Federal Reserve banks do those things, and that's how monetary policy is implemented. So the federal open market operations, they go, it's securities, sales, or purchases. What securities? What kind of bonds? Secure ones. Well, you're on to something. What's the most secure bond you're going to get? U.S. government bonds. So this is why they say, look, Federal Reserve notes are backed by the full faith and credit of the United States because there's markers.
Right at that end.
Don't know that now.
Yeah, it's not. I actually was going to do that, but I don't even know if there's a reason to do that on this one. There's no markers.
So you kind of.
Darn it. There's no markers. Okay.
Hey, Papa, take it out.
So I was going to show you, if you look at the Fed's balance sheet, what do you think the assets are on the Fed's balance sheet? What's the assets? We just said it. Bonds, federal government bonds. They buy and sell them. That's their assets. No. I'm not worried about the amount. I'm not the what, not how much. Generally, what do you think are the assets on the Fed's balance sheet? It's U.S. government bonds. What do you think the liabilities are? Cash, Federal Reserve notes. So your little Federal Reserve note that's issued by the Fed is backed by the full faith and credit of the United States. The reason they can say that is because on their balance sheet, they've got bonds. They go, see, you got money. Your money is backed by U.S. government bonds. So what does the U.S. government do when they issue a bond? What do they get? What do you mean they get money? Is it the money, the liability over here on the Fed's?
To get more of it.
How did it?
Basically just switching assets.
Yeah. So when they want more money, all they do is they issue more bonds. People then spend money to buy the bonds, and then the Fed issues the money back out to the banks. And then the banks lend the money back out as loans, which are essentially assets to the bank, liabilities to you. When you roll through this thing, there's no real asset anywhere. I don't want to see smoke and mirrors. It's backed by the full faith and credit of the United States, which is backed by U.S. government bonds, which are paid for in a currency that backs the U.S. government bonds. And so you see that there's really no asset there. And so if they need more money to pay off the U.S. government bonds, what do? They print more money.
So do you agree that?
And how do they print more money? They issue more U.S. government bonds.
Do you agree that the Fed is a debt machine?
Yes, it is. I mean, that's what it's. I don't want to say that's what it's designed to do, but essentially that's what it effectively does. Monetary policy impacts the amount of currency that's out there. That's why they can take it out and they can burn it up. They can issue more. They can take it out of circulation. They can take it out of circulation by pulling some of these other levers. And we'll talk about those levers here in a moment. So the Fed also impacts money supply through the discount window, which are the discount loans to banks. So if we go back to, I'm going to have switch PowerPoints. I should have embedded this thing in the if we go back to this thing and you look at the Fed, you go, okay, it's got U.S. government bonds, liabilities, Federal Reserve notes, bank deposits. They say, okay, this is a reserve amount that you've got to have from the bank. You got to put
some of those deposits in reserve. So the Federal Reserve will owe that back to the banks. They make loans to banks. Banks borrow money from the Fed for liquidity purposes.
So you can kind of play this game, right, where the federal government goes, you need to have this much in reserve. Okay, I got that much in reserve. I made that deposit.
So you've met this requirement. And then you go, but I'm going to go back to the Fed and borrow a bunch more money at their discount window. I'm going to go to the discount window. Which isn't really all that much of a discount, but it's a discount to the market. They go to the discount window and go, I want to borrow $250 million. And they bring that over here as borrowing. Now, some of that's going to have to go back as reserves, but they're going to go issue that out as loans and make money on it. Or they're going to bring it in as cash to pay off deposits. And so when we go back to the discount window, the Fed can impact the supply of money by loaning banks or making it more attractive for banks to borrow money, reduce the interest rate on borrowing, and then what's the bank going to do? If the bank has to pay 0.25% to borrow money from the Fed, what are they going to do with it if they borrow that money? They're going to loan it out. And who are they going to loan it out to? Yeah, companies and people, and they're going to loan it out at a bigger spread. And so the Fed can go, hey, we're going to make it really attractive for you to get some free money. We'll spread some more. You only got to pay us 0.25%, 1%, 2% interest. You can go loan that out at 5%. If they wanted it to go the other direction, they go, okay, we're going to jack that interest rate up. And then what's the bank got to do if they need that money? They've either got to bring their loans that they're making down, or they got to get the money from where? Other banks, or no, Fed's racked the interest rate up. They've racked up their discount window rate. So if they rack up their interest rate, and a bank still needs money to be able to make loans, and we look at a bank balance sheet.
Call some of the loans in.
Well, you can call loans in, or what else are you going to do? You're going to try and get deposits.
So in order to get deposits, what are you going to need to do? How do you do that?
Offer some stuff.
You offer some stuff. Incentives. What kind of incentives?
Toaster used to work well.
Toaster. What was the deal you were talking about with Toaster, Charlotte?
If you deposit $15,000 minimum, then you will get $300.
Yes. And so what happens is they go, okay, now you start ratcheting up interest rates on the consumer side. Now, what does that do? The consumer goes from being a net spender to what?
Saver.
A net saver. And how does that impact the economy? It tends to cool the economy down. So the Fed uses these little levers to go, okay, we can keep the economy up, we can cool the economy down, we can make it attractive for banks to loan money, we can make it less attractive for banks to loan money, we can make it more attractive for them to go get deposits, or we can make it less attractive for them to get deposits so that folks are spending or folks are slowing down their spending. And that's how monetary policy in a nutshell works from the Fed side to impact the economy. Now, is it perfect?
No.
Heck no.
It's confusing.
It's well, I don't know about
I mean, I'm not
confusing.
confused, it's just that annoying about all the changes they do, you know.
Yeah, there's a lot of little levers that they pull, and not all of them necessarily. I mean, sometimes you got the Fed doing, okay, we want to do X, Y, and Z.
And then on the fiscal policy side, politicians go, no. Elections come up, we want to drop taxes. The Feds go, don't drop taxes because the economy's already warm enough. You're going to overstimulate the economy. So think about this. Let's look at Seattle as a microcosm of America, which it's not. But let's assume for a moment Western Washington is a microcosm of America. And we're running at 3.2% unemployment. We're underemployed. Target unemployment 4%. So wages are going up dramatically because there's a shortage of labor. The market's doing everything you want to do. And then President Trump comes out and says, we want to cut taxes on corporations to 15%. What's that generally going to do from a fiscal policy perspective?
Less government spending.
Less government spending, maybe. You're assuming that they're not just going to borrow money and deficit spend. which the president has said he wants to do with a massive infrastructure package. What does reduction of taxes do to a consumer? So if I said your tax rate is going to drop from 15% to 10%, you got more money. What are you going to do with that? I'm going to spend it. So generally, tax cuts cause the economy to go up. Now, if the economy's already up too far, we're seeing wage inflation, we're seeing price inflation on commodity goods, we're seeing underemployment, and the president's going, guess what? I want more. Cut taxes, increase spending, create big deficits. This is going to be awesome. How's the Fed going to compensate for that? Interest rates go up, and the Fed starts going, okay, Mr. President, you're doing that on our side. We're going to ratchet the other stuff. We're going to ratchet interest rates up because now you're going to issue a bunch more bonds to deficit spend. That's going to have a demand on money for those bonds. We're going to ratchet up interest rates as well, so that way it starts slowing down the ability of folks to borrow. And we're going to try and keep the economy in equilibrium because you are acting like a politician and we're acting like great stewards of the economy. And so they can work at cross purposes, and that's why the system was kind of designed to do that. And there's an argument to be made today that in many areas of the country, you've seen a lumpy recovery to the last recession. So areas out here are booming. You get to the middle of the country and they're not. And so the president's going, okay, I'm going to hammer down. I got to get the economy going. Well, these national policies tend to impact the entire nation. And so areas like us, we go from boom to either super boom, and we start to teeter a little bit because we don't have enough people. You start seeing significant inflation. I mean, some of you guys have already seen significant inflation in things like food and housing. Those things are going to go up quite a bit really fast because supply and demand. Out in the center part of the country, they're just starting to see a recovery. So that's the Fed's ability to impact through the discount window. And so Fed assets, as I showed you on that last slide, or that other slide from a few days ago, that's the bonds purchased and the loans made to the banks. That's their assets. And the liabilities is the monetary base. It's the currency you've got. Your currency is backed by loans made to banks, and it's backed by U.S. government bonds. Money owed by banks, money owed by the government. How are they going to repay that money? And currency and a reduction of bank reserves. So really, you can't kind of go off the grid and go, okay, what's the asset backing that? Because U.S. government bonds have no collateral. You can't go foreclose on the White House or Washington Monument. And so you're like, okay, there's no collateral there. And if you go over to bank loans, you might be able to reach through to get to somebody's collateral, somebody's house or their car, but not if they're making their payments. And so really, the bulk of this is kind of that circular money machine, where there is no true collateral backing any of it, and it's all currency backing currency, which is backing currency, and it's the full faith and credit that actually gets you there. Any questions on that piece? That can be a little bit confusing. It can also be a little bit fascinating. And if you really think about what it means, it can be a little scary because you're like, holy crap, there's really nothing behind my U.S. I mean, you go, what backs a $1 bill is a U.S. government bond somewhere. And so the U.S. government isn't going to go bankrupt because it can print more $1 bills, which is backed by U.S. government bonds somewhere. I mean, there's this argument to be made, bias. There's an argument to be made that like our entire economy is like the Matrix. You really are like, oh my God, I'm plugged in. And I believe it because I'm told I believe it. But if I unplug from it, it's not all that real. and you're like a pod person in a spaceship or something.
It's been like before.
But I mean, at the end of the day, truly the economy, the US economy works because we believe it works. It is the trusting confidence that we have that the United States is going to be there, is going to continue, is going to stand by its obligations, and that these dollars are actually going to be worth something because we say they are, that they're actually worth something. If you lose confidence in the United States government, lose confidence that the United States will continue as a going concern, U.S. government money ain't going to be worth anything. That's when you see alternatives, and we've seen this in other countries where all of a sudden the currency is worth nothing because the government's just printing the snot out of it and they're backing it with government bonds like Zimbabwe, and you end up in a situation where the local currency becomes worthless. So what do they do in that case?
Abandon the currency and go with somebody else's money.
Yeah, they abandon the currency. They may go to somebody else's money. They may go to a barter economy. And we talked about pre-war Germany, where prices were going up so rapidly that between breakfast and dinner, folks would go out and buy food at lunch because you were seeing increases of multiple % during the course of a day. And so you have these situations where once you lose confidence in the currency and you realize that the government may not continue as a going concern, and truly there's no collateral behind any of this, and there's no real asset. You can't go get gold, you can't go get silver. At that point, you're like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm not going to take your dollars, Eddie. You're going to have to give me something. You're going to have to give me your cell phone. You're going to have to give me your watch. You're going to have to give me. We're going to have to go back to a barter economy, or you're going to have to come up with gold earrings or something that I can use, because at the end of the day, I'm taking that buck. That buck ain't worth anything. So what truly keeps the economy running is the fact that the U.S. does a fairly good job of monetary theater and says we're going to keep the economy growing at 2 to 4% per year. We're going to keep inflation in a 2 to 4% band. We're going to keep population growth in a 2 to 4% band. We're going to keep population growth, monetary growth, and the growth of the economy all kind of tied together in that 2 to 4% band. We're not going to let it get too much higher. We're not going to let it get too much lower. So you can rely upon the fact that 10 years from now, the U.S. dollar will be worth about 40% less than it is today, because that's what the inflation rate is. You can count on the fact that the inflation rate is going to be pretty steady, and that the U.S. economy is going to be about 40% larger, and everything's going to kind of be in stasis, because we don't yank hard one direction or yank hard out the other, because if we do, the Federal Reserve sits behind is kind of like this little control piece and goes, okay, politicians, you want to dial this thing up, or bankers, you want to blow this thing up, we're going to come in and we're going to pull all of our levers and try and stabilize the economy. So monetary policy isn't kind of it's a one-sided, oh my God, the economy's got to we got to do this stuff. They're doing it every 6 weeks. Are we too high, too low? Tweak, tweak, tweak. Too high, too low, tweak, tweak, tweak. Too high, too low. And that's why your money has value, ultimately. So when we talk about the monetary base, we've got the money supply. It's the currency in circulation plus checking deposits. I love this is your M1. I love the traveler's checks out because they're a dying thing anyway. And they're a microscopic, as we saw earlier, first class. They're a microscopic piece of M1. So let's assume for a moment the money supply is currency in circulation plus checking deposits, which makes my life easier because I don't have to account for, like, American Express has a bunch of the traveler's checks out there. So we create money. Money gets created by banks and by the Fed. And it's this electronic thing. So let's talk about how money gets created and how important this is. So money gets created by deposits, goes into the bank. So he gets $100 in his paycheck, and he goes and deposits that right into the US bank. So US Bank, let's say there's a 10% reserve requirement. So how much of Eddie's $100 does US Bank need to hold in cash? $10. They have that on deposit with the Fed, and the Fed gives them $10 reserve notes. Now, how much of that does the bank have available to go out and lend? $90. So they go get 90, so now we got $90 worth of Eddie's money, and the US Bank can go loan it out. So Keith comes in and Keith wants to go buy a car. And Keith goes, I need a car loan. How much is the car? $90. So you go, use one. And so the bank goes, okay, here's $90. Keith, here's $90. You owe the bank $90. What are you doing with that $90? Okay, you're gonna go buy Yugo with $90. You're gonna walk over to Sarah. You're gonna hand her $90. What's Sarah gonna do with the $90?
Run away.
What's she gonna do with the $90?
Buy groceries.
Sure. Okay. She goes and buys grocery with it. She spends it because she's done with the Yugo. She would buy herself a Schwinn, more reliable. So she goes. So she goes to the bike store and buys herself a Schwinn. What's the bike store going to do with the $90? They're going to deposit it. So they go deposit it. Now it goes into US Bank. So he's got $100 on deposit at US Bank. She's got $90 on deposit at US Bank. But all we did was had $100 to begin with. Now we got how much? How much is on deposit from that original $100? $190 is on deposit. He's got 100 on deposit. She's got 90 on deposit. Oh, it's no. If Eddie comes in the bank, they got to pay him back $100. They didn't keep 10. They couldn't loan all 100 out. But now she's got $90, right? Because Steve went and bought the Schwinn or the Yugo, but she deposits the $90. Now she's got someone who really wants that Schwinn. So now that $90 goes back to US Bank. What's US Bank do with that $90? They have to put 9 of it on reserve. So now on reserve is $19, and then there's $81 left. What are they going to do with that $81? They're going to loan it back out. And so what ends up happening is that $100 on a 10% reserve turns into $1,000 in the economy, because each one of these trips around the horn, the business or the person is dropping the deposit in the bank, and the bank's going, okay, we got to keep 10% of that and send it to the Fed for the reserve, and the other 90% I'm loaning out because I make no money with it sitting here. And so all of a sudden, this thing turns into it's like a legal federal Ponzi scheme. And so it's called fractional reserve banking. And so now you know that fractional reserve banking bears a lot of resemblance to a Ponzi scheme. So Eddie's $100, when that's created by the bank, it creates $1,000 in the economy. That's called the money multiplier. I don't know if they talk money multiplier explicitly in the book, but money multiplier is one of the things that I learned. And this was one of those things that, like, when I was taking macroeconomics and business conditions analysis, which was our version of this, and then I had money banking. So I had 3 of these puppies as an undergrad. This was the thing that I just geeked out over. Like, wait a second, Eddie's $100 is worth $1,000 in the economy. So if we want to just dial crap up, man, you get the money in there and then you let it run through the system, and it just boom. There's all sorts of cool things. So what you've got is the money gets spent and deposited, and then it just kind of cycles out. Now, eventually you run out of dollars because you're taking 10% off each cycle, and that's going into reserve. So eventually what you end up with is $100 in reserve. You never let the original $100, but each step along the way, you created this money. Now it's not out there in currency. It's all electronically kind of hanging out on people's books. The only currency is still the original $100. How many of you guys think that's an envelope?
Space mine.
It's really cool. So this is what it looks like.
I'm gonna start a bank tomorrow.
So this is what it looks like. So this is why I said, the one thing that you never read in the news is what's the Fed's reserve rate? You always listen, oh, what's the discount rate? Oh, what's the Fed discount rate? Fed's targeted interest rates. You go, whoa, whoa, whoa. You want to really mess with the economy? You mess with this. You tweak this thing and it's like the emergency rate.
So it has more of an effect than raising the interest rate?
Oh yeah. It's got a multiplier effect. This is crazy stuff, man. This is like ether when you're trying to start the diesel. Or, for those of us who are old enough to have done that, or it's like the emergency brake when you dial up your reserve requirement. So
When your reserve requirement is at 50%, that $100 Eddie's becomes $200 in the economy. If it's at 10%, it becomes $1,000 in the economy. If it's at or a little under 1,000 because you got the compounding linkage.
if it's 1% or 2%, you're talking like $50,000 in the economy, $5,000 in the economy, $10,000 in the economy, 5,000, 10,000. This thing is like massively huge impact to the economy. So
if you change any of these and then incent deposits, you're going to be able to
really drive economic growth. You're going to drive economic activity. You're going to create a bunch of money out of thin air. And you didn't print any more here. I changed the reserve requirement
from 50 to 40 or from 50 to 20. That's easy math. 50 to 20. I haven't printed any more money. I just told the banks they needed to keep less of reserve, they could lend out more.
I just created 2.5 times more money in the economy by tweaking the reserve requirement. So this is a powerful piece on the money supply, and it's one of those elements that doesn't get a lot of news because they don't tweak with it much. It has massive impacts. Little tweak, big impact. So they tend not to adjust it much. I think it's running around, I think the reserve requirement right now is around 10%. During the recession, the Great Recession, they decreased it. The top banks, trying to force banks to start throwing liquidity into the market. So this is one of those things that, again, I said 3 macro classes, I geeked out on this thing. I thought this was awesome. So money supply can be calculated based on a currency to deposit ratio and a reserve ratio. We're not going to do calculations in this class. I think I've been pretty consistent going, we're not doing a lot of math in this class, we're talking more policy in this class. But there's a currency to deposit ratio, which basically says how much of the money that's in circulation is reflecting in deposits. Do you think that ratio, currency to deposits? So currency over deposits, currency to deposits. Do you think there's more currency or more deposits? There's more deposits. Look at this thing. You got
$100 in currency. You got $1,000 in deposits.
Okay. So you look at, so what you can measure is you can go, okay, what's the currency to deposit ratio? How much are people holding in currency versus how much have people deposited in the bank? Normally, folks have larger deposits in the bank than they have in currency. But that's something when you guys get nervous, the world gets nervous, what do you think happens to the currency to deposit ratio? More currency. Folks start pulling money out of banks and going, I don't trust the banks, I'm going to put it in my pocket. What do you think that does to the economy? It tanks the economy. All of a sudden, you've taken these multipliers and you said, okay, Eddie pulls his $100 back out.
This whole thing unravels. You pull $100 out, you put $100 in, you get $1,000 worth of economic activity. pull $100 out, you lose $1,000 worth of economic activity because all of a sudden you got to start unraveling
those transactions. Now, again, the whole thing, normally you have this clearing mechanism where everything's got to stay in stasis and it's going up by 2 to 4%. Once that gets out of whack, all of a sudden the economy really starts getting impacted disproportionately. And so you go, okay, we've got the currency to deposit ratio, folks start getting skittish, they start pulling out money out of the economy. They start taking it out of the closets, putting it in their pocket. What do you think then happens to the reserve? What do you think the Fed can then do to the reserve ratio? Drop it down. Decrease it. So they decrease the reserve ratio from
10 to
20% to 10%. So they go, okay, for the remaining money, we want you to get it out there. We're going to require you to hold less reserves so that you can make more loans, because all of a sudden,
the amount that was
available in deposits to hold in reserves has gone down because people have transferred it into currency. And then as currency flows back into, people start spending the money. What happens when Eddie spends the money? Eddie gets scared about the bank, he pulls the money out, he puts it in his pocket. Then he goes and spends it. What happens when he spends it? Charlotte runs a store. She runs a weed and feed. And then he goes and gets a sub. Gets a sub sandwich. She goes and starts spending the money. What does she end up doing with it?
I think
Yeah, she'll go ahead and deposit it. So at some point, when people start spending money again, the deposits start going back up. Yes, ma'am.
It's basically like good for them, but not good for the banks because it drains the money.
Kind of, sort of. So it's what happens is, Eddie's pulled the money out of the economy. He's got it in his pocket because he's nervous. Once he's not nervous anymore, he starts spending. So he goes to the weed and feed and he goes and gets a sub sandwich from Charlotte. Charlotte then goes, okay, now I've got to deposit the money in the bank. Now it starts going back into circulation. $5 at a time. But it starts going back in circulation. Then I get a deposit, money starts going on. So what ends up happening is Eddie normally is not going to throw down that $100 right away. He's got to get some confidence that he can, okay, I don't need to keep this in my pocket anymore. I can start to spend some money. I don't think the world's going to get a hell in a handbasket. But at some point, it ends up re-entering the system, and it starts itself back up. So what the Fed does is it goes, okay, look, we're going to look at these currency deposit ratios, reserve ratios, and we're going to start tweaking things if we start seeing those get out of whack, so that we keep enough money, enough liquidity in the economy, so that the economy can keep rolling. Because as soon as you pull too much liquidity out, the economy stops. Everything freezes.
you've been excited since day one.
I know. You got to see me in a law class. I think that's going to be even better.
So any questions on this money multiple and kind of how it really juices the economy? That's the liquidity that drives the economy, and that every buck is worth 10 times that, essentially, in the
So bank fees,
bank fees.
yeah, so do they just loan that money or they keep it for back?
Oh, it goes into the bank's pocket.
You know what? I'm sorry I'm pissed off yesterday. I opened up some accounts for my kids' savings. And I didn't read the fine print. I didn't know that I opened it last year and I always put money in it. I didn't know the bank was charging me $10 a month. They were taking out $10 monthly from my kids' savings. So I wonder, how can you guys do this? You guys are using my money. So knowing from this, you mean I get charged for putting the money here so you guys can back and use it? It's I need to call the customer service to waive this fee because I didn't know about this. But they didn't, so I pulled some money and I'm gonna move it to a different bank. $10 monthly they took for my kids. It's just a fee. Because supposedly Armos Bank, because supposedly I have to have direct deposit, but I didn't read the fine print. So yeah, I'm not going to do it. Armos Bank on this. Yeah, I'm gonna Lady Pet. She also did BC, right? I'm gonna start it. Really? I really
And you're normally the seniors are pretty good.
Really? Oh. The my kids had a bunch of money there, but just pissed me off.
Much less.
Oh, yeah,
All right, so money supply. Let's talk money supply.
Let's talk about it.
So if you see okay. Back.
Sorry.
So if you see a rise in the monetary base, so in currency and checking deposits, that rises, or in currency and reserve requirements, you see an increase in the money supply. A rise in the currency to deposit ratio decreases the multiplier, and therefore the money supply. Why? Are you asking why?
No, I wanted to go right back to the last subject of the question. So I was thinking, I remember when I got that little stimulus check from W. And I don't think it's part of the curriculum, but what were they doing at that point? I think that was early 2000. The early 2000s, that's what I'm thinking. Had they lowered the Federal Reserve requirements? I mean, was this an all-out assault to do whatever you can to stimulate?
No, so that was fiscal policy.
Okay.
Essentially, what they said was the government is going to issue early tax refunds. So it wasn't even that they gave you money; they just gave you your own money back earlier. You had to declare that you got it on your taxes, and so it was early tax refund.
Ah, yeah. Okay.
So it's
I
fiscal
got
policy.
around September, I recall.
It's fiscal policy, but it has a monetary policy impact. And then generally what's happening is the federal government's sitting on it, and the federal government said, okay, what we're going to do is take currency out, and we're going to fund that with debt. So if you think about how the government works, they go, okay, we spend money, and how do we pay for what we're buying? Well, most of it we pay for with your tax dollars, and what we don't have the tax dollars for, we're going to borrow. And what they did in that particular case was that they said, okay, we'll just borrow some more. We'll issue some more bonds. We'll issue some Federal Reserve notes. We'll send these checks out. You get the check, what do you do with it? You spend it so it turns into a deposit, and then this kicks in. So fiscal policy has, this is where fiscal policy and monetary policy are interlinked. They don't stand independent, and where one impacts the other. So fiscal policy, bang, the government starts spending money. The government, and that's effectively, the government spends money. They give it to you, you go spend money. That's a transfer payment. But they start spending money, and all of a sudden it starts turning into deposits, and that's how the economy starts juicing, is essentially go, okay, we're getting money back into the economy by spending it. And if we spend it, whether it's on shovel-ready projects or whether it's on, we send money to truck and transfer payment, he's not going to go out and start spending it. He's going to spend it. It's going to turn into a deposit. The deposit's going to be multiplied. We're going to juice the economy. So that's the thought process. Is okay. We can get the economy going that way. Turns into wages. The wages that are deposited in your bank account. That runs through the system. You spend the money. It turns into more money, and everything is a happy day. So that's where now if the Fed goes, we don't want to do that. They could throw money out the door. And if I can ratchet this down, and all of a sudden it could completely negate the fiscal policy with monetary policy. The two act hand in glove, but you can put a left glove on the right hand. And you can make it so that the two are working in opposition or working collaboratively. Generally, your objective, of course, is to have both of them working collaboratively and not kind of whipsawing stuff too far out one direction or the other. What happens in practice is when we've had crises, like the 08 financial crisis, the Fed, and there's some books out there on the 08 financial crisis, which are interesting reads, and those of us who lived through it probably remember some of these things. The Tim Geithner and Ben Bernanke go wandering into the White House, and then they bring the congressional leaders in, and everybody sits around the room and goes, okay, how are we going to fix this mess? And they've got a high level of coordination between monetary policy and fiscal policy. They build a coordinated plan of attack
the Fed does its thing, the federal government does its thing, and it works in concert to stabilize the economy and then turn the economy around. That's in crisis time, that tends to be, the US government has done a fairly fine job in 08, in the 80s, kind of going all the way back to the 30s, of getting everybody on the same sheet of music and going, okay, what do we need to do? Let's pull all the levers and do it in concert. There's been other times, however, when one or the other decides that they're going to do something and they don't like it. And so you end up with and one of the classic examples was in the 70s, where you had the stagflation thing, where essentially the federal government, you had high rate of inflation, really no economic growth. The Fed was unwilling to really put the throttle down on one side on the monetary policy, and the federal government had launched two major fiscal initiatives. The first one being the Vietnam War, the second one being the Johnson's War on Poverty. So you had a significant amount of transfer payments and other things going out, and the two were working at cross purposes. And what ended up happening was the economy, on the monetary side, inflation was going up, but the economy wasn't actually being stimulated. And so you ended up in this stagflation mode. Once you got a new Fed chair, Paul Volcker, and a new president, Ronald Reagan, and a new Congress, they started working in concert. Even the Congress, which was a Democratic Congress at the time, they're working in concert to pass laws in order to get the 8182 Tax Reform Act passed, which started to stimulate the economy. For those of us who remember the early 80s and late 70s, and I don't remember it much because I was alive, but I was young, it was not a good time at all. And that was one of the times when the Fed and the US and the federal government were not operating in concert. But when we've had major circumstances or major crises, they tended to operate in concert. I suspect we are entering another phase where the Fed and the federal government will not necessarily operate in concert. Where the federal government may try and overstimulate. You have a business person running the government now, running the federal government, and Republicans in control of all three branches. So you may see a heavy stimulus, and the Fed is largely appointees from the Obama administration over the last 8 years who are probably going to go, okay, let's kind of throttle that back a little bit because we're not going to go to the moon. And so you'll probably see a little dissonance in that in monetary and fiscal policy. That's an opinion, though. So going back to the money supply, rises in currency to deposit ratio, so you get more currency over deposits, decreases the multiplier, and of course the supply of money, why? We kind of talked through the scenario, but I'd like to have you guys talk it back at me.
Well, if there's more currency than deposits, then it's
You said every year
multiplying.
has the multiplier.
So what happens to why isn't there a multiplier? Well, the multiplier stays the same, but what the amount of currency that's being impacted by the multiplier is lower, right?
People withdraw the money, right?
Yeah.
And they're nervous to spend it, so or take it from the bank, so. You said like for every 100 or whatever that is, like there's like 1,000 that comes out from the economy, so.
There's less spending, then there's less money that filters
Yeah.
back to banking deposits. So the bank has less money to loan out to corporations and individuals,
So,
generate less money.
Money's in mattresses.
Money's in mattresses.
yeah, people are afraid to spend.
So the rationale behind it is exactly what you guys are describing. You've taken money out of the system in which it multiplies, the banking system, and put it into a system where it's unitary. $1 equals $1, which is your mattress. And so as a result, until it re-enters the banking system and allows multipliers to hit, you've reduced the impact of that dollar from $10 or $20 or $4 or $2 to one to one.
So bank panics because people pull out cash from banks. What does that do to the currency to deposit rate?
Drop.
More currency, right?
More currency, fewer deposits.
Because they pick up the money.
This was one of the major causes of the Great Depression. So for those of you who are looking at the Great Depression, or elements of the Great Depression as part of your research paper, one of the major causes of the Great Depression was essentially what we just talked about earlier in class, which is folks said, crap, I don't trust the system anymore, and the bank's going to fail. Now, there was actual commodities underlying the money. The coins were silver. The bills were silver certificates and gold certificates and U.S. Treasury certificates, Treasury notes. But folks are like, forget it, man. I know that there ain't enough gold there to cover this. I don't trust that bank. That bank's going to go under, and my money's going with it, and I don't have, nobody's backing that up. That the government might have the money, but I can't get the bills out to get the, so I'm going to take the bills out, so I can then transfer that into silver if I need to, or transfer that into gold if I need to, but I ain't leaving it in that bank. And well, yeah, the Fed took the gold. But what ended up happening then when folks lost confidence in the banking system? They start pulling money out because they're like, I don't trust it, so I'm going to have to go pull the money out of that bank. And I'm just going to hold on to it a while until this thing stabilizes. Then I'll put the money back in the bank. Or I'm just going to hold on to this cash for a while, or maybe I'm going to go trade it in for some commodities. So I'm going to go, but basically I'm pulling this money out of circulation. It had a devastating impact on the economy, liquidity. And this is what happened in 08. If you look at the 08 financial crisis and you look at a lot of the news articles that were out there, they were talking about liquidity. They weren't talking about, oh my God, the world's blowing up. They're talking about liquidity is freezing because banks didn't trust other banks on transactions. And so as a result, they said, okay, I don't know if I can trust Lehman Brothers. I don't know if they're going to be there tomorrow. So liquidity starts freezing up. When liquidity freezes up, the multiplier stops. When the multiplier stops, it tanks the economy. This is like a house of cards, and you pull one of those bottoms out, it's like Jenga. You start pulling these things out of the economy, pretty soon it's going to collapse under its own weight because it's built on multipliers. And so the Great Depression, this was one of the major causes. The money disappeared out of the system because folks took it out, and they said, I'll trust bank and hold it right here in my house. I'll go spend $1 to go buy a sandwich from Charlotte, but the other $5,000, and I got my savings just staying right here until I have confidence that this is going to be okay. I don't care what interest rate you say you're going to give me. It's fine, put it in the bank. So what did the federal government do to try and make that stop? So they shut the bank. You couldn't take deposits out for a week. They put the bank holiday in. Holiday.
Yeah, to make it sound better.
They put a bank holiday in. They said, nope, you can't take deposits out for a week. So we're just going to try and slow this thing down and slow down the liquidity pull out of the system. What else did they do? Talk about it last class.
Stuff like that.
So they use fiscal policy. I'm talking money, monetary policy. No, you're right. They use fiscal policy. So the federal government said, not only are we going to tell the Fed and everybody else to pull all the money levers, we're going to use fiscal policy. We're going to do works products works projects administration. We're going to use Tennessee Valley Authority. We're going to do all these things. We're going to start throwing stimulus dollars, just like President Obama did. We're going to throw stimulus at shovel-ready jobs. We're going to throw stimulus dollars into the system with WPA, TVA, and other major.
What is that? Like, where people thinking the money? I know Charlotte was talking about the money, like, to get more money.
Oh yeah.
I don't
You
get
were too
that.
young when it happened.
I don't get that.
2008.
So what happened was that the federal government back in 2000, 2001, 2002, somewhere in there.
We received in 2007 or 2008. I remember that.
Yeah, there's been a couple times they've done it, but essentially what they did was they'd go, well, they're not really giving you money.
It had been after 01, because 9/11, that kind of lit.
Yeah, I know, I
Yeah.
remember.
What did they give you?
I know.
There was a couple times that it's been done.
In 2008, and I got like 800 or 900.
And what they did was they prepaid part of your tax refund. So you then had to declare on your taxes, I got $800 earlier this year. And what they did was they were like, okay, we're trying to juice the economy now instead of waiting until April. So well, it's fine, it's a strategy. So that's all fiscal policy, government spending. On a monetary policy side, what else did they do? What other acronym filled thing did the federal government throw out there? And we talked about last
Like
night.
the FDIC.
The FDIC. So they said, look, we're going to prevent a bank panic. Your deposits are insured up to $250,000, or up to $5,000, $10,000, $50,000, $100,000, depending on when it is in the history. What does that mean? Well, you're going, okay, I at least know my deposits up to $250,000 are safe. So I'm not gonna, if I'm nervous about the bank, I'm not gonna go in and pull the money out. I know it's okay. That leaves it in the system. That allows the multiplier to work. And so, again, when we look at these things, the fascinating thing about the macro economy is it's like a spider web. You pull here and something happens over here. You pull here, something happens over here. So the FDIC was put in place not just to go, okay, Charlotte, we don't want you to take in the last of Uncle Clarence's money out of the thing, and Eagle's got to get his wings and all that stuff, and the village agent's loan's got to stay open. It's not just the liquidity at the local bank level. That's part of it. But the Fed can slow things down and make loans and kind of get the liquidity back in the system. The other part is we don't want to pull the deposits out, because as soon as you start pulling the deposits out of the system, that multiplier effect goes away. And that's devastating to the banks. That's devastating to the economy. So the FDIC was not only designed in the micro side, make you comfortable and go, okay, well, I'm not going to lose my money. I feel better now. Build some stability into your confidence level, which then allows you to start spending again. But it also, from a macro perspective, allowed the money and the money supply and the multiplier effect to stay in the system, as opposed to going, okay, because you could go, well, my money's safe if I pull it out and set it in the mattress too. So it not only kind of got you to the safe point where you go, okay, the bank might not be safe, but my money is safe, so I'm not going to worry about it. It allowed that money to stay in circulation. It allowed that multiplier effect to continue, and it allowed Eddie to go, okay, I can trust U.S. Bank enough to put $250,000 in there. And then you can go, well, I can trust U.S. Bank enough to put money in there. And when Eddie gives you $250,000 to go buy a lot of subs or a couple plants from your place, then you could go and deposit that money into another bank because you know it's safe. And so it just continues the process.
Yes, sir.
So if you have $500,000, right, and you separate into two different bank accounts for, $250,000, although they are under the same social security number, would the bank pay both back?
No, per depositor.
Well, my mom said that you can insure it and that you can have $1 million.
You can buy insurance. Yeah, you can buy insurance for almost anything. And so what you've got is it's per depositor. So the way you game the system, if you want to use FDIC insurance, as opposed to private insurance, is what Sarah's talking about, is you can get an insurance company like AIG or Lloyd's or somebody to go, okay, hey, you got $37 million, you want to put it all at Wells Fargo? Okay, fine, we'll insure that. You got to pay the insurance premium to the Lloyd's, but they'll insure your deposit. If you want to game the system, what you do is you go, okay, this is Eddie's money, and there's $250,000 here. And then it says Eddie LLC under a separate TIN, tax ID number, and there's $250,000. And this is Eddie 2 LLC, and there's $250,000. Where do you go? And this is a US bank, this is a bank.
Credit.
And so what ends up happening with larger corporations who have big dollars, they will tend to stick to what they call money center banks. So your biggest banks, they'll get private insurance backstopping those banks, and the insurance company will underwrite the bank and go, okay, we feel like this bank is a reasonable risk, and here's what your insurance premium needs to be. And they tend to insure around the problem, or they manage to go, okay, we feel like we could put, $100 million in Bank of America, it's going to be fine, but anything over that, we're going to put in a Chase, and once we get to a certain dollar, we're going to put it into another bank. And so they spread their banking relationships around, but it's all driven by per depositor, not per account. And so you can't just open account after account after account at the bank and go, well, I can get $250 million worth of coverage at this bank by opening 1,000 accounts. It doesn't work quite like that. Yes, sir.
So I know companies would sometimes bank in offshore bank accounts and stuff like that to kind of avoid taxes and stuff like that. But how does that help them with insurance purposes?
Some insured, and if you bring it back, you're paying taxes. If you bring it back, you're paying taxes. Yes, only if you get caught, you get caught. As a matter of fact, there's now significant additional reporting requirements if you have control over foreign assets. There's a foreign assets controls list that essentially says, okay, I'm a U.S. citizen, I control foreign assets. You have to disclose those on your tax return, the country in which you have those assets. You bring those assets back in country to the extent you got income generated, you have to pay U.S. income tax. You can avoid U.S. income tax for a certain period of time by maintaining it offshore. Once it comes onshore, you have to pay a tax on it. In theory, even if it's offshore, it depends on your structure, but in theory, even if it's offshore, you have to pay tax on it now, even if you don't have it, but if it's a separate offshore entity. So you say, okay, it's a trust or it's a corporation sitting out in Cayman, and it's just generating cash, you don't pay tax on that until you have constructive receipt of those dollars, which basically is when you repatriate. One of the reasons why the president has said, I want to reduce corporate tax rates to 15%, one of his gambits is that there's a lot of money that's tied up offshore. So companies like Apple will do a lot of their licensing in Ireland. Microsoft licensing in Ireland and the file. And so what happens is when they sell the software, the money goes to Ireland. Well, until they repatriate it, it goes to an Irish subsidiary, which holds the intellectual property rights to the software. Until they repatriate that back to the U.S., they don't pay tax on it. They don't pay U.S. tax on it. They pay Irish tax. And Ireland has some very favorable taxes for folks selling intellectual property. Isle of Man, Luxembourg is another one. So those are tax havens. And essentially, they have these foreign subsidiaries that hold that money. And until they repatriate it back to the U.S., those corporations aren't paying tax on it. They don't construct a receipt. And so one of the president's intents in lowering the tax rate from 35% to 15% is going, look, it's now low enough that instead of leaving it there and paying 20%, 22%, bring it home and pay us the taxes. It's going to be lower, but we're betting that there's a lot more money out there, and so we're going to end up making up the difference. Question whether that full amount will get made up, but that's part of the rationale. We have, perhaps, what we do, have one of the highest corporate tax rates in the world in the United States. If you look at those socialist havens that are like the Nordics, their tax rates, corporate tax rates are lower than ours, significantly lower.
Most of the world's corporate tax rates. Individual tax rates are higher, corporate tax rates are lower. Yes, break time. Let's take a break till 5 after 7. Thanks, Charlotte.
I was debating, because I gave you the break at the beginning of class, but
During the high height of the recession, how low did the Fed bring that reserve requirement?
Reserve requirement, I think, so, I think one of the other guys is running that. Like, yeah, we're sitting here. They dropped the Fed funds rate to 0, so.
But funds rate is the interest rate that I'm gonna charge on the banks.
Yes.
Because they're like a couple, yeah.
Yeah, reserve.
Like a couple dollars. No, not anything I've ever had. They call it extra supposed to pay. Yeah.
Oh my God, now it's like.
Yeah.
That's the first time it happened. We used to have
That's what,
So
yeah.
the
that's
Fed
what-
reserve requirement right now is basically, simplistically, 10%.
Really?
The Swiss accounts are doing
Not anymore. Swiss have actually got much more cooperative with letting folks know who the benefits are. It used to be up until about 10 years ago.
because I was like, I can't just steal money and send it to Switzerland.
No such stuff, my friend.
Yeah.
I figured, I'm like, yeah, how long is that gonna last?
I know they.
But that was up there, kind of, would it?
But I don't.
If all these people start giving.
Yeah.
Yeah. We would
They
certainly-
pay some of the drinks, yeah.
I know they think I was gonna transfer some over there, but then I think I was just afraid it wasn't that great.
No, I wasn't getting nothing.
So I'm gonna go.
It sounds like maybe it's better for savings and USA is better for balance transfers. Yeah.
That's right. For me, it's on the meeting,
Really? Yeah. That's a good deal, yeah.
I'm happy with that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
See, they're more expensive for me.
I love some of my jewelry. They didn't give me a credit the full day, I was so mad because like they're asking for receipts, like, how many are 16 of it?
Yeah.
So you need to keep that stuff.
I didn't even read it. So they want to check and please.
Yeah.
There's 10% in 09 too, so they can look at the other couple points.
Oh, yeah.
See how they can help the economy.
Good thing is, I only have about.
That's when you used to have a good credit.
Yeah. I only create.
2008, 10%, they haven't changed it.
Yeah.
Let me check 2010.
So, yeah. I just have one.
I guess to an extent, I can understand why, because that's the insurance on the whole thing, the US government.
Currency. You have a really good credit and you're getting something. I'm like, of course, right? Like, hey. Checking you son. That's something that comes.
I asked my advisor about that NBA tax transfer.
What they've done now, Keith, is they've changed the, so it's a tiered progressive system, so it starts at 0, then there's a 3% tranche, then everything over X is at 10%. What they've done is instead of doing adjusted to 0, 3, 10%, they've adjusted the dollar requirement a little bit, so they lower the raise against the 3% number.
Yeah.
Like the
But it's not-
4+1 program?
It's not meaningful.
The thing is, you can't register when you first
Well, it's like,
come to St. Martin's, you have to have so many credits through them.
She says I'm too far,
but yeah, they,
too close to being
it was not, it wasn't a big one, like
And honestly-
5 or 10 for a year, you know.
It's not gonna do it unless you can go on campus.
I'd be like.
For me, it's not gonna do
It
anything.
wouldn't- it-
Because-
And that's why I said it's like the emergency brake or the ether, man, they think we could have it out too.
I mean, I need it.
Well, we got the professor. I mean, you can just teach a
I
big
know,
class
Fred.
right
You
here.
should really teach just a class.
I mean, you can teach it for every business class.
Yourself, you're like all
I
around.
teach MBA classes.
You know, I talked to Renee, and we talked about you a little bit. And it's like, oh, he's gonna teach business law. And I said, the last class of finance was a torture. I told him he is very knowledgeable. He got it by some material that's been compressed for 8 weeks. That is really like made it hard, even more. And it's like, oh, this man, no one can top him. So Renee was like praising you. No one can top him. So he said, this guy is like a lawyer. He's sick. He's very smart. I said, oh, I know about that.
I asked my advisor about the business law class I had transferred. And then
Yeah.
she said,
Yeah, Renee, she can be fun as a person, but I didn't like how. Yeah, I didn't like how she was like. Like, you know. How she was terrible.
my wife has furniture on there.
Oh, more.
Wasn't he over in Fort?
No, yeah.
Yeah, he was over.
I didn't recognize it. I thought it
Yeah.
Really? No, so it's like.
He was on board, and then I moved for his advice engineering. So it got all transferred to Renee.
But I'm down with my.
She was.
Oh.
You're looking at, let's see.
She just, I think because so many people work with optionally.
Yeah.
She just got
Yeah, this.
flustered, frustrated, and she
Okay.
just, like, she definitely gonna be out of here.
So.
She was on her work
Chair.
and she gave out, she's like,
Over, yeah. Well, it was, literally, and I'm not going to approve. And you have the local law, I mean, it was really like,
Pick up from.
you just have. So I called and she was really, not customer service, but just treatment.
man, freaking careful, I don't know how to throw the dog.
I mean, she's good, she does it.
I don't think it's, wait, it's funny, she was like,
No, not
you
really.
can't do this, you want to take out a tree plant, and whatever, and I had, in fact, I got a marked off on my, or on my student, whatever.
Yeah.
And then she's like, oh, my mistake, well, I didn't.
I'm like, I was looking up the other day.
I checked off on my student all the time.
Sometimes come up with stuff.
And she's black, so I just get that, she's like, I'm not for the five. So, I didn't regret mentioning it, it's not.
You get some crazy things on here.
I'm not.
She needs women.
Oh,
she makes her too.
Like.
Oh, you don't like
They're
it?
like all the baby
I mean,
stuff that-
Really?
She said she was really working.
We were laughing, I mean, she wanted a roast beef.
I did not find it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, this is the cute one.
I think it's, I think she's.
She's
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my
Are you serious?
No, yeah, like. And then she was like, well, I was like, well, mom told me this is not.
Well, I did. That every time they went for it so far, she's like, Lord, just laughing and she's like, yeah. Yeah, this one, I did this too. But I wanted to be, she wants you to take another, she wants to take another, and we have this different plan for me for like a year. The most we invested and then was transferred to her, she reviewed it. And then now, you know what, you're gonna need another.
She did that with Brianna, too.
Really?
Yeah.
I said, no.
Brianna, she's about to graduate, and she's like, "Ooh,
There was,
I did this wrong. You have to do these wrong."
smokehouse. They would like have.
Yeah.
They added on top of it.
No, she told me I have to do it. She told me I have to do 2 years, like, wait, how are you gonna do it? And then, it's going I just don't have it.
Mom, they had to share.
I don't think I want that.
She had, she was great. Oh, you did?
No, we only had to take 2 years. They were $6. I'm 49. Then I was like, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just say I
You got to see the
Who is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He is very, very good. He's very, very good. He's
But
very
he
good.
was really bad. Well, actually, yeah, we're like, oh, I should.
Yeah, it was seriously not. And then last quarter, then I don't have to take a picture because it was the last time. It was So how was your pregnancy?
This is the, before I was in the military, I was in so the farthest west I've been for is Vegas. Yeah, me and the company. So I was in Before that, I had farther west is Pennsylvania. I'm fine.
I know I was like, oh no, lost center, I didn't have like always before you
I'm
high
scared.
school, blah, blah, blah. And I said that, whatever that, whatever, we did, I have to
I'm trying to think of one.
It's so
Yeah.
And then it's like, it,
Yes, I did. You can work off on the degree of it.
no. I'll be like in summer. All the way online, probably.
Oh, wow. My son,
I don't know. It's not, it comes up here.
My house.
Okay, so you're gonna call me.
Are we not doing our side house anymore?
Candidly, yes, we should be doing it, that folder.
So I was curious, like, what happened, like, yesterday when I was late, did it count that?
I have double type.
You're late a couple, 3 times up, right? I left early. Let's fire to the finish here on monetary policy and tools. So the Fed, when they decide to go play with monetary policy, all right, so when they begin to work on monetary policy, they've got a few tools in their tool belt that they're able to, or levers, levers that they can pull in order to be able to impact monetary policy. So I use the Socratic method here to ask a lot of questions. Let's see what we get through the dialogue. So if the Fed controls the money supply, how can they prevent the next depression? How did they do it in 2008? What did the Fed do in 2008 to inject liquidity into the system? Or what monetary policy?
I need my sunglasses now.
It's where they reduce the amount that they buy the banks that have.
Was that just a month ago, or was that one great thing? Package to bail them out, but
So who created the stimulus package?
that was, I think, the joint thing between the Fed and the president.
The fiscal, right?
So the stimulus package is generally the fiscal policy side. So that's the Fed's, federal government going on, federal government going, okay, I've got 30 jobs, I'm going to tarp this, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna essentially use taxpayer dollars to go inject those taxpayer dollars directly into financial institutions in the form of TARP preferred stock and for acquiring big bond portfolios, for paying construction companies for infrastructure, for clean energy, for all those kind of things. That's the fiscal side. On the monetary side, what did the Fed do?
Lower interest rates.
How did they lower interest rates?
I think they did something about. They dropped them down where they got houses for those like buying houses and stuff like that. It just made everything cheaper that you could get and buy things and put money into it, to whatever you want to buy, car, house, whatever it is.
They pulled the lever. What lever?
Bonds, it was bonds.
So the U.S. government issued a bunch more debt, right? I mean, it deficit spending. I mean, we went from a national debt of 5 to 8 trillion up to 20 trillion in the last 8 years, 9 years. A good chunk of that, they'll blame the past president on it, but a good chunk of that was a fiscal policy to get us out of the Great Recession. And so, it's not just, it was deficit spending, created bonds.
Combination of things.
So it was, but what two things does the Fed really have? What levers do they have to pull?
Yeah.
Reserve requirements and interest rate, the discount rate that they loan money to banks. Remember, I said, look, they could drop this money this low to a really low point. The banks will borrow the money from the Fed and then loan it out and make money on it, right? And then the other thing they've got is the reserve requirement. So Keith, asked the question just before break. He goes, so what did they actually do with the reserve requirement? Because it sits at 10% now, kind of. And I said, well, I don't know. So let's take a look. So we Googled it, and all the, God bless it, the world is so much better than when I was in college. So because you had to go to the stupid, the periodical literature thing, and you had to look up all this stuff. Yeah, microfiche. Oh yeah. Oh, you still have Dewey Decimal at the library. But, normally at the library. What year was this?
Yeah.
1989 and 1993.
So you were there.
I am 46.
So what happened was they have maintained the reserve requirement steady on a percentage basis since the 70s, 10%. It's actually a three-tiered system, which is kind of interesting. Tier 1 is for banks that are from 0. So the first 0 to 10 million, the reserve requirement is 0. From 10 million to 50 million, the reserve requirement is 3%. From 50 million and up, just prior to the recession, it was 10%. What they did was they changed it during the Great Recession to that bottom tier went up to 25 million and then 115 million at 3%. And then anything over 115 million was at 10%. So they kept the same three tiers. What they did was they tweaked the dollar amount that triggered each of those tiers. So essentially what they did was they said, okay, we're going to take this from 30 million, 50 million to 115 million, reduce the reserve requirement on that from 10 to 3. So it kind of gave a little bit of juice into the system and allowed the smallest banks who have the lowest amount of assets to have the lowest reserve requirements. So it gives little tiny small banks an opportunity to go lend more money to be able to help improve their balance sheet. Because a lot of small banks were the ones that got walloped during the recession. You had the big banks, but a lot of small banks, as you've kind of seen, they've gotten gobbled up by the big banks, or they really got hurt. So that's what happened. So they pulled the reserve requirement lever, but not me. They dropped it from 10 to 4, 10 to 5. They kept the same 0, 3, and 10, but they raised the dollars at each one of those break points to allow more money in at a higher multiplier.
So that's what the Fed really doesn't have a lot of, it's got a lot of levers, like we were talking before. That reserve requirement one is that's like the nuclear weapon. That's you move that one a little bit, it has a big impact. So they even in the Great Recession, they didn't really mess with it too much. They tweaked it a little bit. So you've got open market operations. So essentially they go, okay, we're going to buy more bonds. So we're going to pour $1,000 in bonds, which potentially creates $10,000 in money creation. Because again, it goes into a deposit, then it gets spent, then it gets spent, then it gets spent, then it gets spent. So they essentially inject the money back into the financial systems. We'll buy U.S. government bonds, and by buying those U.S. government bonds, it allows the U.S. government to then spend the money. The U.S. government spends the money, gives it to Eddie and a shovel-ready job, gives it to Charlotte in a transfer payment, and then that turns into a deposit, which then turns into monetary stimulus. They changed the discount rate to encourage borrowing. So anybody know what the discount rate was on the Fed discount window at the deepest, darkest depths of the recession?
Let me look it up.
Oh, yes. Okay, Google it. Go quick.
Okay.
0.5.
Lower than that.
0.2,
Lower than that.
0.1.
0.
Negative
Pretty
zero.
No.
Pretty much.
Yeah, they basically said, yep, free money. Come borrow at the discount window for nothing. 0. I think right now it's between 1.25%. So it's not even 1% right now at the discount window. But they dropped it right to the floor. Said, banks, we want this money back in the economy, man. You can borrow from us. If you don't have enough deposits, if you need money, you go to the Fed. We'll just print some more. We're going to shovel it out the door. Now, at some point, you're going to have to pay this back. And we're going to start jacking up the interest rates. But right now, we need this money in the economy, so we're dropping 4 on this thing. Push the money out more. Get the money back in the economy. So that way the banks sit there and go, oh, it's like deposits. Those borrowings are like deposits. So we can take that money in, we got a whole portion of it. Ship it back out in form of loans, those loans turn into deposits, turn into deposits, turn into deposits, turn into deposits, and it has a similar effect. Change reserve requirements. We talked about the reserve requirements. So they could tweak those. They normally don't make massive changes. They change the interest paid on reserves. Here's the other thing, what if so when you get reserves, so you got the reserve requirement, that $9 of Eddie's $100 that the bank couldn't lend back out. They take that money, they put it on deposit at the Fed. Now, if the Fed said, okay, we're gonna pay you 1%, or 5%, or 10% on that, if you wanna get money out of the system, what do you have the Fed do?
Increase that interest rate.
Increase that interest rate, why?
The bank, the consumer bank doesn't want to pay a large interest rate to the Fed.
Yeah, so what will happen is they got those reserves on deposit at the Fed, right? So they got a choice. Okay, we're gonna go out and buy a customer, loan this thing out to a customer, loan to Charlotte for business. And so, we're gonna give money to Charlotte, we gotta underwrite that loan, we gotta charge her interest, we gotta collect it, and there's a risk that she doesn't pay back, there's a risk the Fed's supposed to be paid, there's a risk that we underwrote this thing wrong, there's all sorts of risk associated with it. But heck, if the Fed's gonna let us borrow the money, now this is where I can get Cap, I'm on the board, right? If the Fed's gonna give us a risk-free rate.
Find the pen.
I can't, but I'm gonna break one from my office next time.
No, I
Glasses in a row or didn't show up.
I would love to like participate and have you print like a big top end.
So I could always find a way to get Cap entered into a lecture. So if all you're gonna do is put out the risk-free rate, and they jack the risk-free rate up, the bank goes, okay, I don't need to incur the expense of going to do the Charlotte thing, including the risk of default. I'm gonna loan money here. I'm gonna put money in reserve. Or if I'm not making loans, I can put money in reserve, and maybe I make it a little bit more attractive from the Fed's perspective to put money in reserve. What does that do to the system? Stalls it. It's the same thing as Eddie taking the money, sticking it in his pocket, and going, I'm not going to spend it. You've now taken it out of circulation, you've taken it out of that multiplier, and you've stuck it at the Fed and said, okay, give me interest on it. So the Fed can have impact without changing the reserve requirement by just increasing or decreasing the interest rate they'll pay on that reserve. They can give you an incentive to pull some money out of the system by wrapping that reserve rate up, or not the reserve rate up, the interest rate up for paying on reserves. Make it more attractive, such that it's a risk-free to the bank.
So that means they can put more than that 10% requirement. They can put even more than that.
Well, if they don't want to change the requirement, well, they can. They can change the requirements on the reserve rate. Well, let's say they don't want to do that. Let's say they just want to pump the brakes a little bit on the economy. What are they going to do to pump the brakes on the economy?
Well, increase rate, right?
Yeah, so if you increase this interest paid on reserves, you might get some banks to pull some money out of the economy and leave it in reserve, or not be pushing so hard to get it out the door faster, because you're gonna at least be making a decent amount of money while sitting there waiting for the right loan. They can, so take this off the table, they change the discount rate. They start jacking that number up to reduce the spread. And so what that does is, what does the bank have to do on the other side to its consumers? What does that have to do to the interest rates on new loans?
Increase that rate.
And what's that gonna do to the demand for those loans? Decrease it. What's that gonna do to the economy? It's gonna slow it down. And so the Fed pulls these little levers, and a lot of times you'll hear on the news, they're gonna pump the brakes. They're not slamming the brakes on, they're gonna pump the brakes. So they're gonna pull some of these just a little bit, cause interest rates to rise, reduce the supply, reduce the demand on loans by increasing this. They may reduce the supply of money by doing that. Pull it out of the system, pull it out of that multiplier effect, and that has the effect of pumping the brakes on the economy. Why would the Fed want to pump the brakes on the economy? Why would they want to slow the economy down? Why don't we want 20% growth year over year over year? Inflation, who cares? Who cares? Eddie, who cares? What's wrong with inflation? Well, that little inflation never hurt nobody. What's wrong with inflation?
Here's the currency.
Yes, government.
So inflation's a bad thing?
You know, where
It depends. Runaway inflation is. It kills your savings, so it takes away the incentive to save. Because they did. You go back to that hyperinflation in Germany, right? And you're like, well, crap, I don't want to save money. I got to spend it now. Because I come out at lunch and stuff's going to be more expensive. And it is. And then it's going up and then wages go up. So the government targets an inflation rate. We can talk about that in a minute. But so they basically go, look, we want to keep everything reasonably stable. We could overheat the economy and then you end up with like, you don't have enough labor, the economy self-corrects, and those self-corrections. So before the Fed came into being, when Baron Bison roamed the forests, the Fed, essentially, you had business cycles. We talked about this early in the class. We didn't talk about this even last quarter. You had business cycles that had big high peaks, big low valleys, and they were more frequent, but you recovered a lot faster. So what happened was you had periods of, actually, if you look at the history, you had almost no inflation in the U.S. outside of a blip around the Civil War. You had almost no inflation from 1789 until 1920. Almost none. Or maybe 1900. Let's not take it all the way to 20. Around 1900. You could walk out and you bought a house in 1789. That was $900. You walk back in 1889, it's still $900. You really, now the Civil War might have been $3,000 or $4,000. Then it came right back down. Civil War, because you had a bunch of debt, you had a bunch of soldiers that needed to get paid, you had a wartime economy, they threw a bunch of fiat currency in there. And then over time, they pulled it right back out of the system. And we went back to the commodity standard for money. So when we start talking about monetary policy, the Fed targets interest rates. The book talks about, well, they can target the money supply. They don't. So we ain't going to talk about targeting the money supply. The Fed doesn't target the money supply. They tried to target the money supply in the 70s, and it was, like I told you, there was kind of this disconnect between the Fed and fiscal policy. The Fed goes, oh, we don't care about interest rates, we're going to target the money supply. They got somebody who's smarter than everybody else that come for them and smarter than everybody that's come after them. It was an unmitigated cluster. The Fed does not target the money supply. The Fed targets interest rates, and the money supply is merely the impact. You know, interest rates are going up, we need to decrease the money supply. Interest rates are going down, we need to increase the money supply. That's really what the driver is. They go, okay, we want to target interest rates. We want to target an inflation. We have an inflation target. And if you Google inflation target, Fed's inflation target, it'll come up and it'll go, oh, Fed's targeting inflation target of around 2% annually. And when it gets much over 2%, they roll back. When it gets much below 2%, they cause inflation. And so they target interest rates and they adjust the money supply accordingly. The primary target that the Fed uses is the Fed funds rate. And that's the rate that a bank will pay another bank for an overnight loan. So if Eddie's got some extra money, and Keith needs a little bit of money, he's got a couple choices. What are his couple choices? Where do we get the money?
Right from Eddie.
You get it directly from Eddie, or you can do what?
Or you can get it anything.
You can go, well, Eddie is the bank.
Okay.
Eddie's special. Eddie's the bank. Eddie's the bank and Keith's the bank.
Okay.
Eddie Bank has extra money. Keith's bank's a little bit short.
So the bank's good because the bank's goes to the Fed.
That's basically the two choices.
Okay.
So to sum it up, you got extra money, Eddie's got extra money, Keith's a little bit short. Eddie, you go, okay, I'm gonna go put the money on deposit, I'm gonna increase my reserves at the Fed. And Keith, you go, okay, I'm gonna go to the Fed discount window, I'm gonna borrow from the Fed. Or the Fed goes, well, instead of us having to be in the middle of it, you can go directly. Fed funds rate, you can go, okay, I got a little bit extra, because I'm a little bit short, give me money overnight, and I'll give it back to you tomorrow. Because I'm expecting the deposits to come in, I'm gonna go to the Fed tomorrow, I'm not gonna, my reserve tomorrow's gonna be lower, the loan's gonna pay off, You're going, yeah, I'm gonna need that money back. Because you can't have it. So the Fed funds rate is what they target. It's essentially similar to the discount rate. And it's also the rate that a bank will pay another bank for an overnight loan.
Is there an advantage to doing that versus going to the Fed?
I think there's a transaction cost advantage. It's a good question that I don't really have the answer to. I should, but I don't. But I believe this is that's the normal clearing mechanism, is the Fed kind of facilitates these direct loans. They don't get themselves in the middle where the money's flowing up and down and back and forth. But I think it's all done at the Fed funds rate.
I'm a little confused as to why it's called Fed funds rate when the banks in one thing.
Well, it's the,
Regulated by the Fed.
yeah, the Fed facilitates that trend. You're not sitting on the phone going, okay, let me call the Austin Bank and Sarah Bank and they got extra money. The Fed's facilitating the transaction.
Okay.
As opposed to being the prime, as opposed to holding it, I think you're facilitating the connectivity between the two.
Okay, you also avoid me asking so much return, right?
Well,
From the other bank?
Yes and no. Yes and no. Again, this is something, I will dig into this because this is a big question I don't have the deeper answers to. And I'll kind of sit around, I'm more of a policy guy than the bank mechanics guy. Since you guys want bank mechanics, I'm gonna focus on bank mechanics. So let me get into that. Let's see if I can get you a better answer.
they target Fed funds rate.
A similar system in Europe uses LIBOR. Anybody know what LIBOR stands for?
London International Business Operation Revenue.
I don't.
Nice try. Give me 1 minute to try this. Just kidding.
So London Interbank overnight rate.
Now, LIBOR is not necessarily overnight.
There's a 1 day LIBOR, there's a 30-day LIBOR, there's a 60-day LIBOR. So LIBOR is actually one of the most common, or London Interbank offering rate. The LIBOR is one of the most common floating rates used in the U.S. Most U.S. commercial loans are indexed to one of two rates. LIBOR is one of them. What's the other? No. So in the U.S., you have commercial loans that are indexed to rates.
One of the biggest index rates is the London Interbank Offer Rate. It's the LIBOR rate. St. Martin's bonds are LIBOR denominated, or LIBOR indexed. What do you think the other rate is? The LIBOR, and the other most common for a commercial loan?
The reserve rate. Nope.
Oh my God. I pulled it up and I would Google.
Prime rate. You guys heard of prime rate?
Okay, it's here in the Wall Street Fund. And I'm sorry, I made a mistake of typing, it came up HIV.
No. HIV is not the big rate.
That's for joke only, because I made a mistake of typing. They have HIV AIDS.
So the interesting thing is, the Fed targets the Fed funds rate, and they, leverage thing up and down.
I'm done.
U.S. loans are denominated generally in LIBOR or the prime rate. Prime rate, who sets the prime rate? No. The market sets the prime rate. Who sets LIBOR?
Parliament.
No. LIBOR is market-based as well.
Oh, okay.
But it's a European.
Yeah,
So the market looks at
the monetary policy, they look at the fiscal policy. This is where, instead of the Fed going, okay, the rate's gonna be this, LIBOR is market driven. So what ended up happening, if you go look at the history of LIBOR, and you look at right around the Lehman Brothers crash, LIBOR went up to like 8%, all of a sudden, like that. LIBOR went through the roof because banks go, I'm not loaning money to anybody. I don't trust you to be open tomorrow. I sure as hell don't trust you to be open in 60 days. So the rate I'm going to put on there is going to be really high. Where the Fed goes, well, you're going to borrow from us, it's going to be this rate. Fed funds rate is this. LIBOR, because it's the market rate, the market said, no way, man, rate's going way up. So folks denominated loans on market rates because the market reacts immediately to not only monetary policy, but fiscal policy and other economic conditions. And the banks are like, we want that. We want the market to be driving this thing, not the federal government, or not the Federal Reserve, or not the EU central bank, because they're only a piece of the puzzle. So you see that Europe uses LIBOR. However, Europe doesn't, because you got a European central bank, which serves a lot of the same roles as the Fed. You've got the UK has a central bank, which serves a similar role as the Fed. But LIBOR isn't set by either one of those two. They look at LIBOR when they're making monetary policy decisions. But essentially, LIBOR is not set by central banks, it's a market rate. So the Federal Open Market Committee meets every 6 weeks to review economic data, set interest rate targets, and then based upon that information, they go out and they do their thing. So when you're listening to the news, you're going to hear the Fed met and signaled, favorite news term, signaled that they may look at raising interest rates at their next meeting, which will be held in 6 weeks. And then in 6 weeks, the meetings happen. They're secret. Nobody knows what happens in the meetings, except for the 6 people that are there, except they always leak. And so, and then they go, well, they signal based upon, we'll release like a little memo going, we met, and there's no change in interest rates, but we have concerns about this, that, and the other thing. They signal that there's no rate hike likely in the near future, or that they're going to revisit this, or that a rate hike is likely in 6 weeks. So the Fed Open Market Committee meets every 6 weeks, reviews all the economic data, and there's little teams of economists and other analysts that are putting this information together constantly. They feed the packages up to the Fed governors. The Fed governors review them, exercise the monetary policy between meetings. The 6 gurus meet. They come up with the policy. We're going to increase interest rates by 0.1 to 1%. We're going to target an increase by 25 basis points, which is a quarter of 1%. So when I talk about basis points, 1 basis point is 1/100th of a percent. So 25 basis points is a quarter of a percent. 100 basis points is 1%. You'll see those things in finance world. Sometimes you'll see BP basis points. Sometimes you'll hear people call them BIPs. So when I write 25 BIPs or 25 basis points or a quarter of a percent, those are all the same thing. They'll meet those preset targets, or they'll signal that they're going to do something, and then that'll happen at the next meeting. The FOMC then directs the Fed to use open market levers to adjust money supply to hit the interest rate target. So this is an imprecise science. They're pretty good at it. But they go, okay, buy this many bonds, sell this many bonds, print this much currency, change the discount rate, do these things, and here's the expected impacts on the economy. So with that, that wraps your intro to monetary policy. I'm going to rejigger the syllabus as promised to get us more into the banking side of things and less into the macro policy side of things. I'll queue that up over the weekend. We'll go through kind of the last couple of weeks on Monday and kind of give you a glide path for completion. We'll be doing the final and the take-home final
You'll be getting that final, you'll be getting that final, I think, next Wednesday, I think I'll give it out for completion last day of class. Papers, the last day of class. I'm gonna try and turn grades as quickly as possible. There's a few caveats on that piece, and I'll cover those caveats here.